Welcome to the Top Dog Mindset Podcast, where we unlock the secrets of running a successful dog training business. I'm your host, Kevin, joined by my co-host, Angel. Together, we bring you expert insights, inspiring stories, and practical tips. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, we're here to provide you with the necessary information to build a thriving dog training company. So relax, join us with a cup of coffee as we explore the Top Dog Mindset Podcast.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Kevin here from Top Dog Advertising, and today I have another exciting episode for you of the Top Dog Mindset Podcast. And so today I'm actually going to be recording this solo just because Angel is dealing with some internet issues, so she's not going to be able to be here. And so I thought I would do something a little bit interesting and actually go through one of our posts that we put up inside of our private Facebook group, the Dog Trainer Community, and review some of the questions that people put in there and the responses that we got to one of our more recent posts that got a decent amount of traction that we put up. So the prompt I put into the group was, what part of your dog training business would you simplify if you could? We got a lot of responses from clients. We got a lot of responses from people who were just members of the group. And so, without further ado, the first comment we got was from Dwayne, and he said, CRM, I struggle big time following through with it. So I can definitely relate to this. So this is something for me that I had to force myself to do for quite some time to develop the habit. And I feel like there's been other things like that inside of my business. I remember looking back years ago and even thinking about really being consistent with my Google Calendar. I used to be the king of like scribbling stuff down on a sticky note and, sticking it to my computer or writing it somewhere down in a notebook and then, trying to remember everything off the top of my head and stuff like that. Or maybe I'd set reminders on my phone and things were just in 50 different places. And so that obviously doesn't scale after a certain point. There's a point where you can kind of get away with that. And there's just a point where that no longer works. And so I think the CRM is very, very similar to that in that regard, where there's a point where you can get along managing your business by just sending text messages through your phone, sending emails through your email, calling directly through your phone, using a bunch of different softwares maybe to, get contracts signed, or not even doing that. You're probably not at that point. You're probably just, printing out contracts and scrambling to get a contract printed before you run out the door to go and run over to your consultation and all that stuff, all stuff that I've done. And I think most business owners have done at one point or another. But, there comes a point where that just doesn't scale and it becomes really difficult to grow your company doing stuff like that. Or just even the difficult thing of, not having an organized system. So when somebody is ready to process a payment with you, you don't have a simple way to do that. And then you got to say to them, hey, I'll send you an invoice when I get home or a payment link when I get home. And then we've all seen what can happen with that, where maybe buyer's remorse sets in and they don't end up buying. So I think having an organized system in the first place to just make sure that everything is dialed in and just easily accessible for you is going to make your life the easiest. And I think what this all starts with is really time blocking. So there's going to be two different types of time blocks that we're going to really want to set up here. There's going to be ones that are intended for getting bigger projects done inside of your CRM. And there's going to be time blocks that you're going to set that are really just like your daily maintenance time blocks. So what I always think about for myself is the things that I prioritize are the things that get done. And so what I mean by that is when I really set my mind to it and I prioritize something first thing in the morning and I allocate my 9 to 10 o'clock or 9 to 9:30 time slot to that. By the way, give yourself bigger time slots. Telling yourself 20 minutes is going to be enough. It's not going to be enough. I've had to learn that the hard way many, many times. So give yourself minimum an hour if you're going to be doing just like maintenance type stuff, like I'm going to go into in a second here. And if you get it done in 15 minutes, great. Now you have 45 minutes free to go do something else and you'd be pleasantly surprised. The alternative of not having enough time is way more frustrating. So what you want to do is give yourself enough time where you can sit down in the morning and review your CRM. So what I mean by that is like, what needs to get done in here? What is pressing? And I'm not talking about like building automations. I'm not talking about, building out email sequences and stuff like that. I'm talking about the stuff that needs to get done today that's going to like pay the bills today. So what I mean by that is like, is there a payment that needs to get processed? Is there somebody who needs to be followed up with? Is there a contract that needs to be signed? Is there someone who needs to get rescheduled for their drop off, for their board and train, stuff like that? That's the thing you want to make sure you check off your list first thing in the morning. It's like messaging your leads and moving people through the pipeline and just getting the organization stuff done. The other thing I like to do is at the end of the day, review the pipeline as well, review the CRM as well. So twice a day, first thing in the morning and then at the end of the day. And if you do it throughout the day, you're going to have conversations in there. But if you're struggling struggling with consistency, I think this is a really good place to start kind of like, what would you call it? Like creating those pathways in your brain and really start building the habit of doing this. So everything starts with a habit. Like if you don't have the habit of doing it, it feels like pulling teeth. But as soon as it becomes a norm to you and it's habitual, it's like brushing your teeth. Pardon the pun. But it's like brushing your teeth where you wake up in the morning and you don't even think about it. You're just like, I brush my teeth. That's the first thing I do. I'm not going to do anything else before I do that. And so I think that that's how you want to treat this in your business, is just thinking first thing of the day, I check my CRM. At the end of the day, I review my CRM, make sure everything is done and all the, T's are crossed and I've dotted all my lowercase j's, so to speak. And yeah, if you do that, I think that's going to be a really, really helpful habit to start doing. The second thing is kind of these larger time blocks that I was started to reference before. And what I mean by that is like you really need big time blocks to really get any bigger projects done in your business. So I've found this to be very true where if I'm like, okay, I'm going to give myself an hour tomorrow to start doing email marketing and building an email marketing campaign. It's like, dude, good luck with that. That's not enough time to even do anything really, other than just like check a couple of boxes off your list. If you want to really start building out, more complex funnels and sequences and automations in your business, give yourself big time blocks. So what I'm talking about is block off between 9 a.m. to 1 or 2 and give yourself enough time to really get into flow state and get to work. I was talking to a productivity coach the other day and he said something to me where he was like, you don't really even hit flow state in anything that you're doing until you're about 20 to 30 minutes into the project or into that time block. And I found that to be very true. If I give myself an hour, it feels like just when I'm getting started and getting momentum, it's like the timer goes off or the next meeting pops up and nothing gets done. And so I really need to give myself like 4 hours to really take that first 30 minutes to really get into it, figure out, what I'm going to do and exactly use the brain power to figure out where I'm going with this project. And then once I have that time to kind of achieving that, then I'm off to the races and I'm getting all this other stuff done. So this is all just to say, make sure you give yourself enough time if you're trying to tackle bigger projects. Same thing with recording a course. I know there's a lot of dog trainers that like to do that or want to do that and have talked about doing that for a long time. And, if you're going to try and start recording a basic obedience like leash manners course or something like that, good luck getting anywhere by giving yourself an hour time block. It'd be more appropriate to give yourself like 8-hour time blocks to try and get it done. And, all of a sudden you're trying to record for an hour, you get an hour in, you barely got the camera set up. Now you finally got your angle right and now you're ready to start recording or whatever it is. So I would say, Dwayne, to answer your question, make sure you give yourself enough time. And, I know this can be really difficult as an entrepreneur because there's a million different things that you need to do in your business. Your phone is ringing, you have consultations, you have dogs to train, all that stuff. And some advice that somebody gave me a while ago, I heard somebody say this and it always stuck with me, that there's always a fire in your business. There's always something to get done. And as an entrepreneur, especially when you're running the company entirely by yourself, sometimes you just need to let the fire burn in order to focus on a different fire or to move the business forward, right? And so, yeah, there may have been someone who reached out to you and said like, hey, we need to reschedule our lesson. That does not take priority over you building out a system and doing something that's going to help you make an extra 10 grand this month in your business by like making sure that you actually manipulate and use your CRM the way that it's intended to get the most out of it, if that makes sense. So I'm sure that there's a lot of you guys listening to this that can relate to that and kind of what I'm saying there. So you kind of get the essence, or at least I hope you do understand kind of what I'm getting at here. So the next thing I'm going to go over here is we have quite a few people who I think they're talking about bookkeeping. So we have Chana put in here, put the books. Courtney she put anything the government touches, taxes, withholdings, having to pay myself a salary, keeping track of deductions. I'll come back to that one. I think that's a little bit different. Bobby Lynn put the books, money, I hate doing them. Monica, the paperwork and accounting side. Let's see here. Linda, that's a little bit different. Yeah. So we had a couple of people who are talking like accounting, bookkeeping and stuff like that. Okay. So I have a very simple answer to this. My answer is hire somebody. This is not worth your time doing this. So what I mean by that is if this is stressing you out and you have the money to hire somebody to go into your QuickBooks account, and even if you don't have a QuickBooks account, right, it's probably $100 a month, probably not even that much money. Honestly, you get the cheapest version of QuickBooks online. And maybe you have to pay a one-time fee for an accountant to set it up or for a bookkeeper to set it up for you. And it's going to be anywhere probably between $200 to $500, like one time to get it like set up. And then on top of that, like just monthly maintenance, like you can find somebody to do your books and categorize the revenue and expenses for you for anywhere between like a hundred to $150 a month, sometimes even cheaper than that. So you can go to websites like Fiverr, Upwork, go to Google, type in bookkeeping services, go to Facebook and search for bookkeeping Facebook groups and do a post in there that I'm a small business. I don't have a huge budget. I'm looking for somebody that can do the books for me. I guarantee you'll get flooded with DMs of people who will say, I can do this for this amount of money. And here's the thing. The reason I say hire somebody to do this, I spent years doing this myself and I regret the hell out of it every single day because I just think about the amount of money that I left on the table and time I left on the table when I could have been focusing on way more important things in my business instead of trying to figure out like how to properly, categorize an expense and go into the chart of accounts and, should this be a debit or a credit or, this person asked for a refund and I refunded them $25, but they gave me a check originally and I refunded the money on a card. It's like, dude, this is not worth your time. This is something that somebody else who understands this can do an hour a month of and be done or a couple hours a month and you're done. You don't need to worry about it. You get a P&L at the end of the month or at the end of the year. You hand that to your CPA. They do your taxes. Boom, done. What I always think about with stuff like this is if it's taking you away at all from doing the higher leverage activities in your business, which are marketing and sales and obviously training dogs. But if you're focusing on the business side of things and growing your company, right, that's marketing and sales. If it's taking you away from doing those things and you're spending hours a week or hours a day focusing on your QuickBooks account, it is a colossal mistake. And so find somebody that's affordable, who's going to do a good job, offload this to them and focus on the other things that are going to drive more revenue. Again, as an entrepreneur, you need to figure out like, what do I value my time at? What is an hour of my time? And it's very easy all of a sudden as an entrepreneur to be like, an hour of my time is $250. An hour of my time is $500. An hour of my time is $1,000. But yet we find ourselves doing $15 an hour tasks all the time in our business. Now, I will say, I think that the fact that I did it for years myself gave me a really good understanding of it. And I think it's good that I have that understanding and I can have more of an educated conversation with my bookkeeper and accountant and stuff like that when it comes to, just analyzing profit and loss statements, the balance sheet, stuff like that. But what I will say is, I don't think that was more advantageous than handing it off to somebody and just having them handle that from the first place. So I know that was kind of a long-winded answer, but I kind of wanted to give you just my overall philosophy on it and just what I've found over the years of doing this. So I hope that that's a helpful answer and you get some value out of that. So the next thing I want to go back to here is Courtney. So Courtney said, anything the government touches, taxes, withholdings, having to pay myself a salary, keeping track of deductions. Yeah. So keeping track of deductions, again, that kind of was answered in the previous one, I think. But if I didn't clearly articulate this, get a QuickBooks account, QuickBooks Online for small businesses. That is the best thing to do. I've seen other people try and use other things. I just feel like QuickBooks is the industry standard. I don't know why you would even deviate from that. I just feel like there's so much support, so many people that use it. Every single bookkeeper, accountant knows how to use it. So it just makes your life easy. And make sure you're using some sort of accounting software, though. Trying to do it through a spreadsheet and keeping track of receipts and stuff like that, it's a nightmare. So here's something really practical. Most people never take the time to do this. And it's just because I think this is never laid out and explained to people. So this is, I think, a very practical piece of advice. When you start your business or when you're running your business, if you're feeling like you're lacking organization when it comes to your finances, here's a very simple way to solve that. Go to your local bank, open up a business checking and a business savings account. Maybe you want to get a business credit card. And every single transaction that you do through your business, whether it is income that's coming in or it is an expense that's going out, goes through one of those accounts, either ideally your checking or your credit card. And that way, everything is in one place. Anytime you buy gas, anytime you stop for food when you're in the middle of the workday, anytime you're buying training tools or materials or anything like that, all that stuff, right? That all goes through that debit or credit card. And same thing with income. Anytime you're depositing a check or moving money from a Venmo or a Zelle payment or a credit card, it's all going into the same place. And then you hook those cards up to your QuickBooks account and everything automatically gets imported in. And that way you're not at the end of the year thinking about like, oh, did I really get all my receipts in? All that stuff. So most of this seems very basic to a lot of people here, I would think. And so I'm sorry if I'm boring you, but this is something that was really helpful to me when I first got started. So if you don't have that set up, no shame, obviously. I would just get that set up sooner rather than later because that's going to make your life much, much easier. So Courtney said, anything the government touches, taxes, withholdings, having to pay myself. So I'm going to give a very similar answer to this one as well. And I'm going to tell you, hire somebody. This is one of these things like a bookkeeper, finding somebody that does your payroll. It's not that expensive. And again, if you find yourself like stressing about this, you could probably find somebody for $100 a month. All in, you're probably paying $250 between your bookkeeper and your payroll service, and they're processing payments. They're taking care of all your bookkeeping for you, and it's just totally off your plate. And it saves you hours and hours every single week. I used to live up in Massachusetts with my wife, and I owned a business there. And I did all my own bookkeeping and I did all my own payroll and stuff like that. And I think back on the amount of time that I spent, like when I would get a letter in the mail from the state of Massachusetts saying like, hey, we've changed our, withholding requirements for this new government program that we have that's for paid time off for new parents. And all of a sudden the rate would go from like, you have to withhold, I don't know, I'm going to pull random numbers out, right? Like 1.3% to 1.75%. And I'd have to go and figure out and do all these calculations. And then I would get it wrong. And it could be getting letters in the mail from the state of Massachusetts. You owe this much money. And it was such a pain in the ass. And so what I would tell you guys is if you can find somebody to do that for you, just offload that. I'm very blessed in the sense that my sister-in-law works and basically runs a payroll processing company. So she helps us out and everything's taken care of. Like anyone who is like working hourly, they just put their hours into a spreadsheet. It goes over to that company. They do the calculations for us. They pay them. Anyone who's just on a salary, that's even simpler. They just get paid a salary, same amount every 2 weeks. When I get paid out of the company, same thing. It's like I just get paid the same amount of money every 2 weeks. And boom, it's done. They do all the withholding. They take care of certain insurance policies for us as well for our workers. And so that's all taken care of for you. Listen, I know I'm being very redundant here, but I think it's worth repeating. A lot of us are very penny wise and pound foolish, as the saying goes. And in an effort to save money, we actually end up costing ourselves a lot of money. Because in an effort to save $250 a month by not paying a bookkeeper and a payroll service, we spend 10 hours a week doing all this nonsense, and we cost ourselves 10 hours of really good productive time to be marketing and selling and all that stuff. So that would be my very simple advice. Now, if you don't have the money, it's important to note, right? Yeah, you may have to do it yourself, but the goal is to grow beyond yourself doing everything in your business. So as soon as you have the money and you can upgrade your lifestyle and your business, I would offload both of these things sooner rather than later. And just again, interview a couple different companies, a couple different people, get a referral, make sure you're getting somebody really good to take care of the stuff for you. It is very important. You want to get somebody trustworthy because they are going to be in some cases handling money and having access to financial records and stuff like that. So just make sure that you get somebody really trustworthy and really good in to do all this stuff. So the next thing here is paperwork, right? So, you guys are going to see a common theme here. It's all going to be about hiring. So that's because that is really the answer. If you're at a point where you're so busy and you come home and there's a stack of paperwork and you feel like, I don't know when I'm going to have time to do this, or things are getting forgotten and stuff like that, I think a really good strategy is bring in a virtual assistant. So you could have somebody who's US based, maybe that's like a friend or a family member, and just say, you teach them how to send emails, you teach them how to send out contracts, reschedule people. And that's probably going to be a little bit more expensive than option two, which is hiring somebody overseas. So there's a great website called onlinejobs.ph, and I found some really incredible people off of there. Some people who have been working with me for years, and some of the most dedicated, loyal people I've ever met in my entire life. And they're all based in the Philippines. And depending on the tasks that you're having them do, they will do an extremely good job for you. So if it really is just paperwork, if it really is like, hey, I need you to send out these invoices and make sure they get paid and contracts and stuff like that, and whatever other pieces of paperwork that are kind of hanging you up, I think hiring somebody like that overseas is a really, really good thing to do. You just need to have really clearly documented SOPs, trainings on how to do it. So just use a screen recording software like Loom. Loom's totally free, and record yourself doing the tasks and give them checklists. Here's something that you can do to make your life super easy. If you have Loom, I'm pretty sure this is in the free version too. You can, if it's not, maybe it's in the paid version. I don't think it's that expensive each month anyway, but you can use Loom to record yourself, and then it's going to record you and it's going to create a transcript of your audio. And then you can take that audio, copy it, paste it into ChatGPT and say, I want you to create a checklist that goes along with this training on how to do X task. And it'll give you an SOP and ask for the SOP and the checklist. It'll give you both those things, and you'll have everything that you need to put in a document so that you can give that to your VA and they can clearly do it. But a lot of times people hire somebody and they don't train them. They never give them these things. And then in 2 weeks, they're like, they didn't do this and this, they didn't do this. They're unreliable. They don't do what they say they're going to do. They need to be trained really well. The other thing is you don't even need to hire people full time. There's a lot of people on that site that are looking for part-time work, and you can teach a monkey to turn a wrench. Not to sound insensitive towards anybody. I mean, I am the monkey who can be taught to turn a wrench, right? And so I think what you really need to do is just like find somebody that you think is really trustworthy, really honest, is going to show up, do the work, and you can teach them how to do anything. So if you feel more comfortable and you have like a friend who is looking for some part-time work and you say, hey, I want to hire this person, perfect, bring them in. If you're looking for somebody you don't know where to start and you can't find anybody good, I think onlinejobs.ph is a really good place to do that as well. So the next thing here is going to be, we're going to go into, so Linda said, why I don't need or want to do board and train. Yeah. So Linda, I hear where you're coming from with this. And I know that this can be kind of frustrating for some people. We have some people I've worked with in the past and continue to work with now that only do board and trains, or some people that only do private lessons and stuff like that. And sometimes it can feel like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, right? Where you're like, they are so adamant about doing board and trains. They have their mind set on doing board and trains, and I don't do that. I do private lessons. But I think that's where really good salesmanship comes in, and understanding that that is an objection that they're giving you and being able to overcome that. So this is why I think that doing evaluations, consultations is so powerful. And that can be in person, face to face. That can also mean doing them over Zoom or FaceTime and stuff like that. But what I'm really getting at is like, in order to overcome those objections, it's not going to happen in a 5-minute phone call. And I just think that's what a lot of people try and do. Like somebody calls and maybe you give them 5, 10, 15 minutes. In order to change somebody's heart and mind, sometimes it takes an hour or 90 minutes to do that. And so I think that having a longer form conversation, meeting with them face to face or over a Zoom call, I think gives you more of an opportunity to do that. And then I think just realizing that like not everybody's going to be your client as well. And that's okay. You don't want to try and force a situation if it's not actually going to work. But I just think that a lot of people come along and they feel like I need to do private lessons, or I need to do a board and train, or who knows why they arrived at this conclusion as far as that's what they need for their dog. A lot of times it just starts from a place of them not knowing. And so I think by educating them and having the opportunity to really go into it in depth, then you're going to have a much better shot of being able to persuade them to doing the other program and why that other program actually makes more sense for them. So the next thing here is Josh put screening calls. So yeah, I think a really simple way to do this for anybody, if you have a CRM, there's ways to do this and set up like call screening inside of that CRM. But I believe I know a lot of people have iPhones, and I think the new iPhone update actually has a feature where you can turn on call screening. And I'm actually seeing this more and more when I call people. It's saying like, hey, leave your name and the reason you're calling, and we'll see if we can connect you with this person. And so that's a really good feature that if you're looking for something nice and simple, you can turn that on as well. And the last one we're going to do here is, we actually have 2 more. So Sid Happens Dog Training, put the owners, So if we could simplify anything, I guess it'd be communicating with the owners and dealing with the owners' objections to wanting to do their homework and train their dog and actually be involved in all that stuff. I'm assuming that's where you're getting at there. And what I always think about is, yeah, I mean, that's always the trickiest thing in any business, is dealing with the people. And so Yeah, I've read quite a few self-help books and psychology books and stuff like that, and I found that stuff to be very, very helpful. And what I've kind of tried to really make myself think about when somebody's being difficult or they're asking a bunch of questions or they're not doing what I ask them to do is they're not doing this from a place of malice. They're not trying to intentionally make my life hard. They just don't know what they don't know. And a really good coach, which is what all of us are, as a dog trainer, especially if you're doing private lessons, like you are a coach, right? You're training the dog, but as everyone always says and points out, like you're actually training the human being. And so being a really good dog trainer sometimes does mean being able to really, again, change the heart and mind of that person and make them see the light and set up accountability structures in place to get them to do what we actually want them to do and deep down what they actually want to do as well, but they just have a mental block around. And so I don't know if that was a helpful answer, but an accountability structure could look something like, hey, I want you to send me videos or photos of you training every single week. We have a lot of clients who do that and they don't even actually look at the videos. They just look to see if somebody actually sent the video. Because if they sent the video, that means at bare minimum, they did a minute or two of training. And more than likely, if they get started training, then they probably did 15 minutes or 20 minutes of training. And I think for most people, if they can just do 5 minutes once a day or even a couple days a week in between your sessions, that person's going to be getting way more progress and be way further along than had they not done anything at all. So the last thing we're going to go over here is kennel techs and owners. So I think I just covered the owner thing, but yeah, kennel techs. So what I always think about with kennel techs is it can be a tricky position to hire. It's not like they're making $1 million a year, right? But there are really good, hardworking people out there. And I think what a lot of people are looking for is a job where they feel valued and where they can earn an income. They have the opportunity to earn more as they go on. And some people really like the idea of being able to advance in their career as well. And so I think there's a lot of people that you can start them off at, $15 an hour as a kennel tech and, with the idea that like, hey, this is not going to be a forever thing with you. Some people, we have trainers who they have kennel techs in their company and that's all they want to do. They're like, I don't want to do anything else. I don't want to train dogs. I just want to be a kennel tech, make 15 bucks an hour. I'm happy. Boom, done. I think for other people, if they have ambitions of growing, I would ask them that and tell them like, hey, I'm looking to grow this business. If you do a good job with this, then I'm more than happy to, help bring you along and teach you how to train dogs and make you an associate trainer and then a lead trainer or a head trainer and be able to take on your own clients, make more money, all that stuff. Now, from a practical standpoint, I don't mean this in a demeaning way whatsoever, but I think there's a lot of people who can relate to this. And, I'm saying this because I had very humble beginnings myself. My first job, I was a dishwasher. And it doesn't take Albert Einstein to do that job, right? It doesn't take Albert Einstein to be a dishwasher. And so I think for kennel techs, there's more skilled involved in that than being a dishwasher, but it is a low skill entry job, so to speak, right? And so what I am looking for, what I would be looking for in that position is not even necessarily somebody who's done it before, right? I'm looking for somebody who has intangible traits of like honesty, hardworking, reliable. If you have those three things in that person, you can teach them how to, clean kennels. You can teach them how to feed dogs. You can teach them how to let dogs out safely and all that stuff, That third one is going to take a little bit more time and training, but the first two, anybody can be taught to do that. And so I think the main three components you're looking for when you're hiring somebody is really the intangible personality traits, because you don't want to, I guess what I'm getting at here is like, if I had two candidates and one has experience as a kennel tech, but they don't have those other traits, and the other person doesn't have experience, but they have those traits, I'm taking the second person 100 times out of 100, because again, I can teach them how to do the other stuff. And what I really don't want to ever have to deal with in my business is someone who doesn't show up, doesn't do what I ask them to do, and, maybe kind of, doesn't tell the truth all the time, or yeah, just the unreliability. You can't grow a business with inconsistency and unreliability. So that would be my advice on the whole kennel tech thing. So I hope that was a helpful answer. So I'm going to wrap the video up here, but I hope you guys got some value out of this. I hope that I was able to shed some light on anything for you. And I know I gave some long-winded answers there, so I apologize if I bore anybody to death, but I just wanted to kind of pack this as much as I possibly could with as much value as I possibly could. And yeah, I'm going to hopefully be doing more of these in the future just because, sometimes I see some really interesting comments and questions and stuff like that in our group. And I just want to be able to give better feedback on all that stuff to help you guys and genuinely be able to see you guys all win and grow your businesses. So, with that being said, I'm going to wrap things up here for this video. If there's ever anything I can do for you guys or any questions I can ever answer for you, make sure to drop them in the comment section. And I'll do the best I can to get to all of you guys. So, that being said, I appreciate all your support as always. And I will see you guys all very soon in the next video. See you guys.